The Boeing 737 groaned through turbulence somewhere over the Pacific, its wings trembling against winds that seemed intent on tearing metal from sky. Passengers clutched armrests, their knuckles white, their prayers silent. In the cockpit, Captain Raymond Moss felt his pulse hammering against his throat as he stared at the instrument panel, a constellation of warning lights blazing red and amber. His co-pilot, First Officer David Huang, wasn't responding. Huang's head lolled against the headrest, his breathing shallow, his skin the color of wet concrete. Food poisoning, maybe. Or worse. They were 43 minutes from Honolulu with 217 souls aboard, and Moss felt his own vision beginning to tunnel, his hands shaking as he reached for the radio. "Any cabin crew, get me the passenger manifest, now." His voice cracked. He'd been flying for 26 years, had weathered storms and system failures, but this was different. The aircraft shuddered violently, dropping 50 feet in an instant. Screams erupted from the cabin. Moss could feel the controls fighting him, the hydraulic system compromised, the backup generator flickering. He needed help, not just any help. He needed someone who understood machines that defied death, who'd made decisions in the space between heartbeats. "We need a pilot, military preferred, check everyone." The senior flight attendant, Maria Gutierrez, moved through the aisles with forced calm, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. Business class yielded nothing. First class, retirees and tech executives. She pushed toward economy, scanning faces, looking for something she couldn't name. Row 10. A woman slept there, curled against the window, her jacket bundled as a pillow. Dark hair pulled back, worn tactical boots visible beneath frayed jeans. Gutierrez almost passed her, but something made her stop. A small patch on the jacket, faded, an eagle clutching lightning bolts. Ma'am, I need you to wake up." The woman stirred slowly, eyes opening to reveal a gaze that had seen horizons most people only imagined. She was maybe 38, lean, with hands that bore the calluses of someone who'd worked with more than keyboards. Beside her seat, a backpack with a janitor's uniform visible inside. A name tag, V. Cade. "What's wrong?" Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. "We need a pilot," the captain asked for military experience. "Are you?" Valentina Cade sat up slowly, her expression unreadable. She glanced toward the cockpit, then at her hands. For 3 seconds she didn't move. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, her movements economical, precise. "Take me forward." Moss barely looked up when Gutierrez knocked. His focus remained locked on keeping the aircraft level, on fighting the controls that bucked like a living thing beneath his grip. The door opened. He expected someone in uniform, someone whose presence announced authority. Instead, he saw a woman in civilian clothes, tired eyes, janitor's boots. "You've got to be kidding me." "Captain, she says she's qualified. Her jacket has a squadron patch." Moss felt desperation warring with disbelief. He had no time for this. Huang's breathing had gone ragged. The stick shook violently in his hands. He looked at Cade, really looked, and saw something that made him hesitate, a stillness that didn't belong to amateurs. "What's your background?" 12 years Air Force, F-16 and 18, 2 deployments, instructor pilot for 4 years. Her voice carried no pride, no inflation. Just facts delivered like coordinates. "When's the last time you flew?" 7 months ago, medical discharge." Moss's jaw tightened. Medical discharge could mean anything: injury, PTSD, substance abuse. But Huang was unconscious now, and the aircraft was losing altitude despite Moss's efforts. The Pacific waited below, dark and infinite and utterly indifferent. "Get in the right seat. Touch nothing until I tell you." Cade moved past Huang without hesitation, settling into the co-pilot's chair with a familiarity that couldn't be faked. Her hands went to the harness buckles, securing herself with practiced efficiency. She scanned the instrument panel, her eyes moving in a pattern Moss recognized. Threat assessment, system status, backup options. No panic, no questions, just observation. Hydraulic failure, primary and secondary. Backup generator offline. We're flying on mechanical reversion. Moss's voice was clipped, professional now. If she was going to be here, he'd treat her like crew. Fuel status. 42 minutes at current consumption. Honolulu's our only option. Cade's fingers moved to the controls, not touching, just hovering. Moss watched her in his peripheral vision, trying to read her. She didn't look like the pilots he knew. No swagger, no bearing that demanded recognition. She looked like someone who'd been erased, who'd chosen disappearing over fighting to stay visible. Radio's yours. Call approach. Tell them we're emergency status, 2 pilots compromised, 1 backup. Request priority vectors and emergency equipment standing by. She reached for the headset without hesitation. Her voice, when it came through the radio, was different, clearer, carrying an authority that hadn't been there moments before. Honolulu approach, Trans-Pacific 472, declaring emergency. We have dual pilot incapacitation, hydraulic system failure. Request immediate vectors and emergency services on arrival. The response crackled back instantly. Trans-Pacific 472, Honolulu approach, roger your emergency. Squawk 7700, vectors coming. What's your fuel and souls on board? 40 minutes fuel, 217 souls. We need the longest runway you have in foam if you've got it. Moss felt something shift in his chest. Relief, maybe, or just the recognition that he wasn't alone anymore. The aircraft bucked again, harder this time, and Cade's hands moved to the controls without asking permission. She felt the resistance immediately, the way the stick fought back, the sluggish response that meant they were flying on cables and prayers. Moss didn't stop her. He couldn't afford pride now. Feel that lag? We've got maybe 60% control authority. Turns are going to be slow. We'll need extra spacing on approach. Agree. What's your recommendation? Cade's eyes never left the instruments. Shallow descent, wide pattern, single attempt landing. We won't get a second chance with these systems. Moss nodded. She was right. In the cabin behind them, passengers sensed the change. The way the aircraft's shaking had steadied slightly. The way the descent felt more controlled. Gutierrez moved among them, her face a mask of calm professionalism, while inside she wondered who the woman in the cockpit really was. Valentina Cade had not expected to touch aircraft controls again. 7 months since the medical board had grounded her, 7 months since they'd taken her wings and handed her a diagnosis. Vertigo, they'd said, inner ear damage from too many high-G maneuvers, too many years pushing her body past its design limits. She'd argued, she'd appealed, she'd lost. And then she disappeared into the civilian world, taking a janitor position at a hospital in San Diego because it required no explanations, no history, no one asking why someone with her skills was pushing a mop. Her daughter Iris was 6 years old and asked questions Cade couldn't answer. Where do you go during the day? Why don't you fly anymore? When will we have more money? Cade had raised her alone since her husband died, an accident, training mission gone wrong 3 years back. The Air Force had been family after that until it wasn't. Now she worked nights, slept days, and tried not to think about the sky. But the sky had other plans. Her hands remembered everything her mind had tried to forget. The weight of the controls, the feedback through the stick, the way an aircraft spoke to you if you listened, vibrations and resistance, and the subtle wrongness that meant systems were dying. She felt all of it now, felt the Boeing bleeding energy, felt Moss beside her fighting his own fear. Approach is vectoring us in. Heading 270, descend to 8,000. Moss nodded. Together they brought the aircraft around, the turn agonizingly slow, the wings heavy with the weight of damaged systems. Below, the Pacific caught the dying light, turning it into something beautiful and terrible. Cade had always loved this moment, the transition from day to night, when the world existed in shades of possibility. Tell me about the medical discharge. Moss's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Vertigo, inner ear, they grounded me. You feeling it now? Cade paused. She'd expected the dizziness to return the moment she sat down, expected her inner ear to rebel, expected failure. But there was nothing, just the familiar sensation of flight, the way her body knew instinctively which way was up. No, it's clear. Moss studied her for a long moment. Good, because I'm going to need you for the landing. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. He was trusting her, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice, and maybe because he saw something in her that she'd stopped seeing in herself. Honolulu approach guided them in with the efficiency of professionals who trained for disasters but rarely faced them. On the ground, emergency vehicles assembled, fire trucks, ambulances, airport authority vehicles with lights painting the tarmac in urgent colors. The tower had cleared all other traffic. The longest runway stood empty, waiting. Trans-Pacific 472, you're cleared straight in approach runway 8 left. Wind 280 at 12, gusting 18. Emergency equipment in position. Cade acknowledged, her voice steady. Beside her, Moss began the approach checklist, his movements automatic despite the tremor in his hands. The aircraft descended through 10,000 feet, then 8, then 6. The island emerged from the darkness ahead, lights scattered like dropped stars, the airport a bright constellation in the center. Gear down. Moss reached for the lever. It moved with mechanical resistance, and they both held their breath waiting for the confirmation lights. 1 green, 2, 3. The landing gear was down and locked. A small mercy in a night of failures. Flaps to 15. The aircraft shuddered as the flaps deployed, adding drag and lift but also resistance to their compromised controls. Cade felt the stick grow heavier, felt the Boeing wanting to pitch left. She compensated, her inputs small and precise, and Moss watched her with growing respect. In the cabin, Gutierrez made the final announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach into Honolulu. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your seats are upright. Remain calm and follow all instructions from the crew. Her voice didn't waver, but her hands shook as she secured herself in the jump seat. 4,000 feet. The runway lights resolved into parallel lines of white and amber. Cade had landed aircraft in sandstorms, on damaged runways, on carriers pitching in heavy seas. But this felt different. This wasn't training. This wasn't combat. This was 217 people whose lives depended on her remembering skills she'd been told she no longer possessed. Speed's good, sink rate's high. Give me a little more nose up. Cade pulled back gently on the stick. The Boeing's nose rose incrementally, bleeding speed, trading forward velocity for the descent rate. She could see the threshold now, could see the numbers painted on the concrete. 8 left. Their destination. Their only chance. 100 feet, 50, ease it back, more, that's it. The main gear touched with a jolt that rattled teeth. Then the nose gear came down, and they were rolling, decelerating but still carrying too much speed because the hydraulics that powered the brakes were compromised. Moss applied reverse thrust manually, and the engine screamed in protest. The runway streaked beneath them, white lines blurring into a continuous stream. We're not going to stop in time. Cade's mind calculated distances and deceleration rates in microseconds. The runway was 10,000 feet. They'd touched down at maybe 1,500 feet in, which gave them 8,500 to stop. But their speed was still too high, the brakes too weak, and the overrun at the end led to rocks and water. Emergency brake, full reverse, everything we've got. Together they fought the aircraft, and slowly, too slowly, it began to yield. Speed bled away. 60 knots, 50, 40. The end of the runway loomed, and for an instant Cade thought they'd failed, thought they'd survived the descent only to die on the ground. Then the Boeing shuddered to a stop, its nose pointing toward the overrun, its wheels still on pavement barely. Silence. The engine spooled down. Outside, emergency vehicles raced toward them, their lights painting the aircraft in red and white and amber. Inside the cockpit, Moss released his grip on the controls and realized his hands were shaking uncontrollably. Beside him, Valentina Cade sat motionless, her eyes still forward, her breathing slow and controlled. That was, Moss couldn't finish the sentence. His training had carried him through the crisis, but now, in the aftermath, shock was setting in. That was a landing. Cade's voice was soft, almost gentle. She unbuckled her harness and stood, her movements steady despite everything they'd just endured. Your passengers are safe. Get Huang to paramedics. I'll help with the evacuation. She moved toward the cabin before Moss could respond, before he could ask her to stay, before he could process what had just happened. The cabin erupted in applause when she appeared, passengers standing despite the crew's instructions, reaching out to touch her as she passed. Cade barely acknowledged them, her focus on helping the elderly, the families with children, ensuring everyone moved toward the exits in an orderly fashion. Gutierrez caught her arm. "Thank you, I don't even know your name." "Doesn't matter, just help me get everyone out." But it did matter. Within hours, it would matter more than Cade could imagine. The airport's emergency response team swarmed the aircraft with professional efficiency. Paramedics boarded immediately, taking Huang on a stretcher while Moss walked out under his own power, though his legs felt like water. Passengers filed down the inflatable slides, some crying, some laughing with the euphoria of survival, all of them transformed by proximity to death. Cade was the last to leave. She stood in the empty cabin for a moment, looking at the rows of seats, the overhead compartments still closed, the ordinary space where ordinary people had come so close to extraordinary tragedy. Then she descended the slide, her tactical boots hitting the tarmac with a soft thud, and walked toward the terminal building without looking back. An airport security officer intercepted her. "Ma'am, we need you to stay. There'll be an investigation, statements. The NTSB will want to talk to you." "I understand." They led her to a small room, windowless, fluorescent lit, furnished with a table and chairs that looked lifted from a police station. Coffee appeared, bitter and hot. Cade sat and waited, her mind already moving past the landing, already thinking about the questions that would come, already preparing for the moment when someone would check her credentials and discover she was supposed to be grounded. Captain Moss found her there an hour later. He'd changed into a clean shirt someone had given him, washed the sweat from his face, but his eyes still carried the weight of what they'd survived. He sat across from her without asking permission, studied her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You saved us all. You would have made it without me." "No, I wouldn't have. I was losing it. Huang was out. I couldn't think straight. You came in and just—" he shook his head. "Where'd you learn to fly like that?" "Nellie's Cadena. Bagram, places where you learn or you don't come home." Moss absorbed this. "What's your call sign?" Cade hesitated. Call signs were personal, often embarrassing, always meaningful. Hers had been given to her after a mission in Afghanistan, after she'd brought a damaged Viper back from a strike that should have killed her, after she'd landed on fumes with hydraulics failing and her wingman calling her insane for even attempting it. Hail. Like Hail Mary. Like the stuff that falls from the sky when conditions are impossible. A smile ghosted across Moss's face. "That fits. Listen, the NTSB's going to want a full debrief. They'll check your credentials, your medical status. You should know." "I know what they'll find. I'm grounded. Medical discharge. I wasn't supposed to be in that cockpit." "But you were, and you saved 217 lives." Cade looked down at her hands. "Regulations exist for a reason. Safety isn't subjective." "Neither is competence." Moss leaned forward. "You showed me more skill in 30 minutes than some pilots demonstrate in their entire careers. The medical board can say whatever they want, but I was there. I saw what you did." Before Cade could respond, the door opened. A woman in an NTSB jacket entered, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of professional neutrality. Behind her came a man in an Air Force uniform, a colonel, his chest heavy with ribbons, his face familiar in a way that made Cade's stomach tighten. Colonel Marcus Webb, her former squadron commander, the man who'd signed her discharge papers. Captain Cade. His voice was formal, careful. Didn't expect to find you here. Sir, I was a passenger. They needed help. Webb's eyes moved between Cade and Moss, reading the situation with the speed of someone who'd spent 30 years evaluating pilots. He saw Moss's protective posture, saw Cade's resignation, saw the truth written in their shared exhaustion. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Cade stood and followed him into the corridor, leaving Moss and the NTSB investigator behind. They walked in silence until Webb stopped in front of a window overlooking the tarmac, where Trans-Pacific 472 sat surrounded by inspection crews, its fuselage bright under portable lights. You flew that. Captain Moss flew it, I assisted. Don't play games with me. I've already heard the preliminary reports. Moss said you handled the approach and landing, said you saved his life and everyone else's. Webb turned to face her. You've been grounded for 7 months. Medical board said your vertigo made you unsafe. Now you land a crippled aircraft in an emergency. How do I reconcile that? Cade met his gaze directly. I don't know, sir. The vertigo wasn't there. Maybe adrenaline suppressed it. Maybe it's situational. Maybe it was never as bad as the tests suggested. Or maybe the medical board was wrong. The words hung between them, dangerous and full of possibility. Webb had been a mentor once, had recommended Cade for instructor pilot, had written fitness reports that praised her judgment and skill. But he'd also signed the discharge, had accepted the medical board's findings, had watched her walk away from the service without fighting for her. I can't undo the discharge. The bureaucracy doesn't work that way, but I can request a medical reevaluation, get you in front of a new board. No promises, but after tonight, he gestured toward the aircraft. After tonight, you've got credibility, real-world performance under actual emergency conditions. That matters more than any simulation. Cade felt something crack inside her chest, hope maybe, or just the fear of hope. Sir, I've moved on. I have a daughter, civilian job. I can't afford to get pulled back into evaluations and appeals just to be rejected again. Can you afford not to? The question struck deeper than Webb probably intended. Cade thought of Iris asking why she didn't fly anymore, thought of the janitor's uniform in her backpack, thought of the way her hands had remembered every input on the controls, the way the vertigo had been absent, the way flying had felt like breathing. Let me think about it. Webb nodded. Fair enough, but Cade, tonight proved something, not just to me or the Air Force. You proved it to yourself. Whatever happened during those medical evaluations, whatever they found, it doesn't define what you're capable of. Remember that. He left her standing at the window, staring at the aircraft that had become an unexpected turning point. Behind her, voices echoed through the terminal, passengers reuniting with loved ones, crew members giving statements, emergency personnel coordinating the massive response. But Cade heard none of it. She was thinking about control sticks and hydraulic failures, about a 6-year-old girl who believed her mother could do anything, about the difference between being grounded and choosing not to fly. Her phone buzzed, a text from her neighbor who was watching Iris. Saw the news, that was your flight. Are you okay? Cade typed back, I'm fine, be home tomorrow, hug Iris for me. Another buzz, a news notification. Emergency landing in Honolulu. Grounded pilot saves 217 lives. They'd already found her story, already turned survival into spectacle. She powered off the phone, knowing what would come next, interview requests, attention she'd spent 7 months avoiding, scrutiny that would examine every decision and every second. The NTSB investigator found her an hour later. The interview was thorough, technical, focused on procedures and decisions rather than drama. Cade answered every question with precision, walking them through the hydraulic failure, the control limitations, the landing calculations. When they asked why she'd been grounded, she told them the truth: vertigo, medical discharge, no flying for 7 months until tonight. And you experienced no symptoms during the flight. None. Clear head, normal vision, balance was fine. The investigator made notes, her expression neutral. That's unusual. Medical conditions rarely resolve on their own, especially inner ear issues. I know. We'll be including this in our report. The FAA will likely want to examine you as well. This could affect your medical certification status. Cade nodded, knowing it was inevitable. She'd broken no laws. Helping in an emergency wasn't a violation. But she'd revealed that she was potentially flyable, which meant the bureaucracy would take notice. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. They released her near dawn. Moss was waiting in the terminal, having refused to leave until he'd spoken with her again. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed but determined. They're putting me up in a hotel. Company's bringing in another crew to take everyone on to Sydney tomorrow. You need a place to stay. I can find something. Cade, please, let someone help you for once. She wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain the independence she'd built over 7 months of refusing help, refusing pity, refusing anything that felt like charity. But she was tired, and Moss's face held only gratitude and concern, no judgment. Okay, thank you. The hotel was generic but clean, the kind of place airlines used for crew layovers. Moss got her checked in, made sure she had everything she needed, then paused at her door. I meant what I said earlier. You saved us. Not just the landing, the whole thing. The way you kept calm, the way you handled the controls. I've been flying 26 years and I've never seen anything like it. You would have done the same. Maybe, but I didn't have to. You were there. He extended his hand. Thank you, Captain Cade. She shook it, feeling the strength in his grip, the sincerity in his eyes. Valentina, just Valentina now. No, tonight you were Captain Cade, don't forget that. He left and Cade entered her room, closing the door on a day that had started in San Diego and ended in ways she couldn't have predicted. She showered, washing away the sweat and tension, then lay on the bed in the hotel bathrobe, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept replaying the approach, the landing, the moment when the wheels touched and she'd thought they might not stop in time. Her phone powered back on, flooded with messages. Missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Emails from news outlets. Text messages from old squadron mates she hadn't heard from in months. And one from Colonel Webb. Medical reevaluation board scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Mandatory. Orders being cut. Don't fight this. Cade closed her eyes. She'd spent 7 months learning to be invisible, learning to exist in a world that didn't include flight. Now, in a single night, everything had changed. The sky had reached down and grabbed her, pulled her back, reminded her that some things couldn't be erased just because paperwork said they should be. She thought of Iris, thought of how to explain this, thought of what it would mean if the medical board reversed its decision. Hope was dangerous. Hope made you vulnerable. But lying in that hotel room, her body still remembering the feel of the controls, Cade couldn't help but feel it blooming in her chest despite all her attempts to bury it. Outside, the sun rose over Honolulu, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, Valentina, Hale, Cade finally slept, her dreams full of wings and weather and the infinite possibility of second chances. The story spread faster than Cade anticipated. By the time she boarded her flight back to San Diego the next afternoon, her face was on news websites, her name trending on social media, her story distilled into headlines that made her sound like either a hero or a cautionary tale, depending on the outlet. Grounded pilot breaks protocol to save 217. Medical discharge didn't stop her from landing crippled plane. Air Force veteran, from janitor to lifesaver in minutes. She kept her head down in the airport, wore sunglasses despite the indoor lighting, and tried to ignore the stares from passengers who'd seen the news. A teenager asked for her autograph. An elderly man shook her hand and thanked her, tears in his eyes, explaining his daughter had been on the flight. Cade accepted their gratitude with quiet grace, but inside she felt like a fraud. She'd done what any competent pilot would have done. The attention felt disproportionate, uncomfortable, wrong. Iris was waiting when Cade arrived home, bursting through the neighbor's door the moment the taxi pulled up. 6 years old, dark hair in pigtails, eyes that were exactly her father's, bright and curious and full of absolute faith that her mother could fix anything. "Mommy, you were on TV. Mrs. Chen showed me. You flew a plane and saved everyone." Cade dropped her bag and scooped Iris up, holding her tight, breathing in the scent of her daughter's shampoo and feeling the solid reality of her small body. This was what mattered, not headlines or medical boards. This. "I helped land a plane. The captain did most of the work. But everyone says you're a hero." Cade set her down gently. "Heroes are people who run toward danger when they don't have to. I was already in danger. I just helped us get out of it. That's different." Iris's face scrunched up in concentration, trying to understand the distinction. "But you saved people. That makes you a hero." There was no arguing with 6-year-old logic. Cade thanked Mrs. Chen, confirmed she'd be back to her normal work schedule, and guided Iris inside their small apartment. It wasn't much. One bedroom that Iris occupied while Cade slept on the couch, a kitchenette with appliances that worked most of the time, furniture from thrift stores. But it was theirs, paid for by her janitor's wages, independent and private and safe. "I'm hungry. Can we have mac and cheese?" "Sure, baby. Go wash your hands." While Iris was in the bathroom, Cade's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Captain Cade, this is Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Okonkwo. I'm the presiding officer for your medical reevaluation board. Colonel Webb asked me to contact you directly." Cade's heart rate spiked. "Ma'am, I've reviewed your case file and the preliminary reports from Honolulu. Extraordinary circumstances. I want to be clear about what this board will entail. We'll conduct a full medical workup in her ear function tests, flight simulator evaluations, psychological assessments, the works. If you're cleared, we'll consider reinstating your flight status. If not," she paused. "If not, this will be the final determination. No appeals. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Your orders are being emailed tonight. Report to Travis Air Force Base in 12 days. Bring everything you need for a week-long evaluation. Questions?" 1,000 questions, but Cade asked only one. "What are my chances?" Okonkwo's silence stretched for 3 seconds. Honest answer: "I don't know. The original board's findings were solid, but what you did in Honolulu suggests either the testing was flawed or your condition is variable. We'll find out which. Be ready." The call ended. Cade stood in her small kitchen, listening to Iris singing in the bathroom, looking at the calendar on the wall where she'd marked her janitor shifts in neat pencil. 12 days until her life potentially changed again. 12 days to prepare Iris. 12 days to decide if she actually wanted this or if she was just chasing something she needed to let go. Iris emerged, hands dripping wet. "Who was that?" "Work stuff, baby. Let's make dinner." They made macaroni and cheese together, Iris standing on a stool to help stir, chattering about school and her friend Maya and the new book they were reading in class. Normal life. Simple life. The kind of life Cade had built from the wreckage of military discharge and widowhood. A good life, even if it wasn't the life she'd imagined. After Iris was asleep, Cade sat on her couch in the dark, laptop open, reading through the medical board documentation Colonel Webb had forwarded. The original evaluation had been thorough, multiple tests showing vertigo symptoms, balance issues, spatial disorientation during simulated flight. She'd failed every metric, and she'd felt terrible during those tests, dizzy and nauseous and wrong. But in Honolulu, she'd felt nothing but clarity. What had changed? The adrenaline? The stakes? Or had the medical condition been psychosomatic all along, her body's response to grief and loss manifesting as physical symptoms the doctors could measure? She didn't know, but she had 12 days to figure it out. The next morning, Cade called her supervisor at the hospital. "I need a week off. Personal emergency." "When?" "Starting next Monday." Her supervisor, a tired woman named Linda who managed the cleaning staff with efficiency and surprising compassion, sighed. "You've never taken time off. I can cover it. Everything okay?" "Medical stuff, I'll know more soon." "Take what you need. Your job will be here when you get back." Simple kindness from someone who didn't know Cade's history, didn't care about call signs or combat hours. It steadied her. Whatever happened with the medical board, she had this to return to: stability, security, predictability. The days passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Cade took Iris to school, worked her shifts, came home and researched inner ear disorders and medical appeal processes. She ran every morning, testing her balance, paying attention to any hint of dizziness. Nothing. She felt solid, grounded, normal. But would that translate to flight simulators and medical equipment? Colonel Webb called on day 7. "How are you holding up?" "Nervous, sir." "Good, means you care. Listen, I pulled some strings. Got you sim time at Miramar before your board, tomorrow night after hours. Solo. Give yourself a chance to see if you're still sharp." "Sir, I don't know if that's smart, allowed, probably neither. But you need to know what you're walking into. Can't have you freezing up during the evaluation. Meet me at the base at 2100 hours. Bring your ID." He hung up before she could argue. Cade stared at her phone, then at Iris sleeping in her bedroom, then at the calendar. Tomorrow night she'd sit in a simulator for the first time in 7 months. Tomorrow night she'd find out if her body would betray her the way it had during the original evaluation. She barely slept. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch Iris. Cade drove to Miramar in her aging Honda, arriving at the gate precisely at 2100. Webb met her there, already cleared her through security. They walked to the simulator building in silence, their footsteps echoing off concrete and metal. "You remember how to strap in?" "Yes, sir." The simulator cockpit was an F-16 replica, her first operational aircraft, the plane she'd learned to love and hate and trust absolutely. Cade climbed in, her body remembering the positions, the harness buckles, the switch locations. Webb stood outside, arms crossed, watching. "Start with basic maneuvers, straight and level, turns. Then we'll see if you can handle more." The simulator came to life around her, screens glowing, instruments reading nominal. Cade's hands found the stick and throttle without conscious thought. She ran the startup sequence from memory, her fingers dancing across switches, her eyes scanning gauges. And then she was flying, not really, but her brain didn't know the difference. The simulator responded exactly like the real thing, and for the first time in 7 months, Valentina Cade felt complete. No dizziness, no vertigo, just the pure sensation of flight. Webb watched for an hour as she flew increasingly complex scenarios, combat turns, instrument approaches, emergency procedures. She executed each one with precision that hadn't dulled despite months of forced absence. Finally, he stopped the simulation and climbed up to the cockpit. "How do you feel?" "Good, clear, no symptoms." "Exactly like the medical board, or different?" Cade considered carefully. "During the board eval, I felt wrong before I even started. Anxious, sick. Tonight I feel like I never left." Webb nodded slowly. "Psychosomatic, probably stress-induced. Your husband's death, then getting discharged. Your brain decided flying was dangerous and manufactured symptoms to keep you out of the cockpit. Classic trauma response." "Can you prove that?" "No, but you can. At the board, you'll need to demonstrate consistent performance under pressure. Show them what you showed me tonight. Show them Honolulu wasn't a fluke. He helped her out of the simulator and they walked back through the empty building. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the scent of jet fuel and ocean salt. Webb stopped at her car. I should have fought for you 7 months ago, should have questioned the medical board's findings. I let you down. Sir, you followed procedure. That's what you're supposed to do. Sometimes procedure's wrong. Sometimes we need to trust what we see over what paperwork tells us. He met her eyes. You're one of the best pilots I've trained. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, especially not yourself. Cade drove home with her hands steady on the wheel, her mind quiet, her heart cautiously hopeful. She'd passed Webb's test. Now she had to pass the Air Force's. 5 days later, she stood outside the Medical Evaluation Center at Travis Air Force Base, wearing civilian clothes, carrying a small duffel bag, feeling like she was reporting for basic training all over again. Lieutenant Colonel Okonkwo met her at the entrance, a tall woman with sharp eyes and an expression that gave away nothing. Captain Cade, welcome, let's get started. The next 7 days were the longest of Cade's life. They tested everything: balance, vision, hearing, reflexes, psychological state. They put her in simulators and watched her fly. They induced stress and measured her responses. They questioned her about Honolulu, about her medical history, about her husband's death and her daughter, and whether she was trying to recapture something that was gone. She answered truthfully, she performed flawlessly, and she waited. On the final day, Okonkwo called her into a conference room where 3 other officers sat behind a long table. Medical files were stacked in front of them. Cade's entire career reduced to paper and digital records. Captain Cade, this board has reviewed all available evidence regarding your medical status. The original discharge was based on consistent vertigo symptoms that made you unsafe for flight operations. However, your performance in Honolulu and during this evaluation demonstrates no evidence of those symptoms. Our medical staff believes your condition was stress-induced and has resolved. Therefore, we are revering the original board's decision. Your flight status is reinstated, effective immediately. Welcome back, Captain. Cade heard the words but couldn't process them. 7 months of grief and loss and rebuilding, and now she had her wings back. Tears stung her eyes. She fought them down. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank us yet. You'll need to complete recurrency training, 6 weeks at Nellie's. Then we'll evaluate assignments. Given your instructor pilot background, we're considering putting you in a training squadron. But that's down the road. For now, report to your unit commander for orders. Dismissed. Cade stood, saluted, and walked out of the conference room on legs that felt like they might not hold her. In the hallway, Colonel Webb waited, his face breaking into a rare smile. I told you. Yes, sir. Go home to your daughter, enjoy it, because Nellie's is going to kick your ass. Cade drove back to San Diego in a daze. She'd done it. Against probability and bureaucracy and her own damaged belief in herself, she'd gotten back what she thought was lost forever. But as the miles passed, a new anxiety settled in. What did this mean for Iris? For their life? Could she really go back to the military after building something different? She had no answers, only questions and 6 weeks to figure them out.